I'd lost a husband, a home, and half my pride. It was the last thing I needed. He was a blacksmith who thought he could charm the rest out of me. As luck would have it, the wheel gave out right in front of the blacksmith shop. I stood beside my wagon, one hand on my hip, the other fanning my neck with a lace-trimmed handkerchief that had seen better days. I unhooked the mule. The beast was cooler than I was. He wandered off to chew weeds beside me like it was Sunday tea. The wagon leaned like a drunkard. Back left wheel cracked clean through, and my pride wasn't far behind it. But I refused to let this setback break my spirit. Dust clung to my boots, my hem, my eyelashes. My corset had fused to my ribs, and the blacksmith? Nowhere to be seen. I shaded my eyes and walked toward the wide barn door of Dawes and Sons Forge. Nothing. No Dawes. Just hammering. Loud, slow, methodical, like someone punishing the very concept of metal. I cleared my throat. Nothing. I knocked on the beam beside the entrance and hollered, "Hello?" The hammering stopped. Then there were footsteps, heavy ones. A moment later, he stepped into the light, and my breath caught. He wasn't shirtless, but he may as well have been. His undershirt was soaked, clinging to every line like it owed him something. Sunlight carved golden streaks over muscle and soot, his jaw rough with stubble, his hair damp with heat. That apron, those eyes. I forgot how to blink. "Need something?" he asked, voice rough as gravel. I straightened. A wheel. And decency. One eyebrow lifted. "This is a forge, ma'am, not a tea room." I resisted the urge to swat at my hair, which had begun escaping its pins like a flock of startled hens. "That may be, but I assume you don't hammer iron in your drawers, so perhaps I can overlook the state of your, Words failed. Heat surged to my cheeks. The corner of his mouth twitched. Depends on the day. I ignored that. "My wagon's broken. I was told you were the only smith in town." "You were told right." "Well then," I gestured to the wagon as if presenting a corpse. "Do your worst." He sauntered out, took one look at the wheel, and crouched low. I tried very hard not to look at the way his shoulders shifted beneath his tanned skin. I failed. "You hit a rock," he said. "I hit Kansas," I muttered. "Nothing but rocks." He smirked, glancing up. "You're not from around here." "I didn't come for the scenery." He rose, wiping his hands on a rag. "I'll need a few hours. Could patch it faster, but it won't last." "And what'll that cost me?" "Depends. You want honest work or quick work?" I looked him square in the eye. "I want it done right, but I'll not be robbed just because I've got a lace handkerchief and no husband trailing behind me." He tilted his head. "Fair enough. I don't charge for lace." I held out my hand. "Lettie Hollis." He took it. Warm, calloused, solid. Calder Dawes. Our hands lingered a beat longer than was polite. Then the mule brayed, the wind kicked up dust, and I remembered myself. I withdrew my hand, smoothed my skirts, and narrowed my eyes. "Just fix it and try not to scorch your nipples in the meantime." I turned on my heel before he could see me blush. Behind me, I swear I heard a chuckle. As I walked away, leading the donkey, I heard the creak of leather and the clang of tools being gathered. I didn't look back, not even when the dust stung my eyes. I told myself I was composed, that I'd handled it well, that I didn't notice the heat lingering on my palm from his touch, or the way my heart thumped like a knock at the door. But truthfully, I noticed everything. The way his eyes stayed a second too long, The way his voice dropped at the edges, the way his skin looked was like it had swallowed the sun. And what I didn't admit, not even to myself, was this. I hoped the man with fire on his arms and soot on his smile would be the one to surprise me, because heaven help me, I could use a surprise. I went to the general store. The bell above the door jingled like it was surprised to see me. I stepped into Dawson's general store with dust in my boots and a list in my hand. Every head inside turned. Of course they did. I wasn't there to dawdle, or gossip, or, heaven help me, smile. But the townsfolk were already whispering. Says she came from Denver. Wagon cracked clean in front of Calder's place. Ain't no ring on that finger, I looked. I straightened my spine, lifted my chin, and walked past the crates of beans like I owned them. I did belong here. I'd moved in that very morning to the weather-worn cottage down near the river, left to me by my great-uncle. It came with a crooked stove, a broken fence, and more spiders than floorboards. And Clementine. That goat was part of the charm, according to the solicitor. In truth, she had the soul of a saboteur and the appetite of a drunk pirate, but we'll get to her in a moment. I was halfway to the flour sacks when a voice from the back spoke just a touch too loudly. Bet you 5 cents you can't do it. There was another voice, amused. 5. You're dreaming. Calder Dawes could charm the bonnet of a nun. He'll have her kissed before Founder's Day. I froze. Heard he said it himself. Said she was just mad because she was lonely. Poor thing. A lady can only hold out so long. The lard felt suddenly heavy enough to throw. With effort, I placed it back on the shelf, gently, like it might explode. Then came the sound that broke the moment. A clamor outside, something metal, something hoofed. I turned to the window just in time to see Clementine the goat trotting proudly past, dragging a tin bucket behind her and wearing my corset tie like a victory sash. The townsfolk gasped. One woman shrieked. A child applauded. And Calder Dawes? He leaned against the porch rail of Dawson's, chewing on a stalk of dry grass like he'd been waiting for the show. I stepped out onto the porch, furious and flustered. Your goat's got better fashion sense than you. She came with the cottage, I snapped, like mildew or termites or regret. He stood straighter, arms folded, that smirk dancing behind his eyes. I hear, I said, loud enough for the gawkers to hear. You're placing bets on my lips without so much as asking my permission. His brow lifted. That so? That is so. I jabbed a finger in his direction, and before you pretend you didn't, let me be very clear. If you think I'm the sort of woman who kisses blacksmiths to settle barroom gossip, I don't, he said calmly. That shut me up. He stepped closer, voice dropping. I didn't start the bet. Dan and Hattie did. I just didn't stop it. Which is the same thing. He shrugged. Maybe I just wanted to see what you'd do. I glared at him, cheeks hot. Fine. Let's make it official. He blinked. What? A wager, I said, planting my boots. If you can get me to kiss you before Founder's Day, you win. No slap, no scandal. I'll hand it over honest and proper. His eyes narrowed, intrigued. And if I don't? Then you fix everything I need fixed this summer. My roof, my stove, my wagon, for free. And you keep your mouth and your charm to yourself after that. No more games. He grinned. And if you kiss me by accident? I won't. But if you do, then I lose. He let that hang in the air a beat, then held out his hand. You're on. I took it. Big mistake. His grip was warm, rough, confident. The kind of grip that said he'd win, but wouldn't gloat about it. Not much. Our eyes locked, something pulsed in the silence, something not entirely appropriate. And then Clementine collided with a barrel of flour. The thing went down like a felled tree. A white cloud exploded. Several townsfolk coughed. I didn't turn around. I just stared at Calder, deadpan. I hate that goat, he chuckled. I don't. I'd lived through war, marriage, and a dinner party where the hostess served chilled squirrel pâté. But nothing had prepared me for goat ownership. Clementine had been part of the cottage's charm, according to the solicitor. In truth, she was a feral, four-legged menace with a fondness for chewing under things and headbutting flower pots. She had the soul of a bandit and the eyes of someone who'd once watched a man burn and enjoyed it. That afternoon, I wrestled with a laundry line while Clementine stood 3 feet away, chewing thoughtfully on what used to be a petticoat. "No," I hissed, yanking the fabric from her mouth. "That is not a snack. That is—" I blinked at the soggy lace. "Was my dignity." Clementine bleated, unapologetic. A voice called over the gate. "Anyone alive in there?" I turned, hair pinned up haphazardly, apron askew, and dirt smudged across my cheek. And there he was, Calder Dawes, leaning on the gate like he'd just strolled out of a dime novel, shirted this time. Tragically. He carried a small crate in one hand and a bundle in the other, wrapped in a red-checked cloth. "What are you doing here?" I asked, wary. He unlatched the gate and stepped through like it was his yard. "The handyman couldn't make it," he said with exaggerated innocence. "And me, being the neighborly type, I dropped everything to help a lady in distress." "That's just who you are, is it?" He nodded. "A model citizen. Some say heroic. I say shameless." He grinned. "Potato, potato." Clementine trotted up and immediately tried to headbutt his shin. "Friend of yours?" he asked, sidestepping smoothly. "She pays rent in chaos," I muttered, dragging her away. He held up the cloth-wrapped bundle. "I brought bread." I narrowed my eyes. "Is it poisoned?" "Fresh. Baked it myself." "You bake?" "Only when insulted." I opened the door and let him in, mostly so the neighbors wouldn't see me debating with a man on the porch about baked goods. He took in the crooked porch, the leaning fence, the rusting stove against the side wall. No comments, just that maddening, unreadable look. "I assume you're here to help with something specific?" "Fence post," he said, gesturing toward the tools he'd already noticed. "And maybe patch the shed door if you ask real nice." "Oh, I'll ask," I said sweetly. "Right after, I thank you for trying to weasel your way into a kiss via charitable labor." His mouth twitched. "Are you accusing me of cheating?" "I'm accusing you of weaponizing flour and courtesy." He crouched beside the post and began unpacking tools from the crate. "So, you admit you're tempted." "I admit nothing, except maybe that you're smug." He looked over his shoulder. "And you? You've been airing your laundry right in view of the road. You were trying to lure me in with petticoats and passive aggression?" I rolled my eyes. If I wanted to win, I'd just let Clementine chew your shoelaces while I read poetry in the shade. He glanced down. Too late. I busied myself with the laundry and did not watch the way he moved, how his sleeves rolled up, how his arms flexed with each measured strike of the hammer. His arms flexed with such precision, strength, but care too. After a while, I said, quieter, "You're not what I expected." He didn't look up. What'd you expect? Grunting, beer breath, possibly a missing tooth? He laughed. "My brother's got that one." "Ah, so you're the pretty one." Now he looked at me, slow and amused. Am I? My throat tightened. Don't let it go to your head. He stood wiping his hands on a rag, then stepped closer. Not too close, just enough that I could smell cedar smoke and sunlight. Tell me something, he said, voice softer now. Was your husband a good man? The question landed like a blade. I looked down at my hands. He died in a war he didn't believe in. Left me a funeral, a house full of debt, and when they returned his things, there was a dress, 2 sizes too small, from his mistress, I assume. He didn't interrupt, just waited. I looked up, chin set. Are you sorry you asked? He shook his head. Just sorry someone made you think you were worth less than you are. The air between us went still. He reached out, slow, deliberate, and brushed a streak of dirt from my cheek with his thumb. My skin burned. I didn't move. His hand lingered, then dropped. I'll come back tomorrow, he said, voice rougher than before. Finish what I started. Good, I whispered, unsure what I meant. He turned to leave, paused at the gate. Founder's Day's getting closer. So's the sun, I snapped, just to say something. He smiled. Let me know when you start rooting for me. Then he was gone. I stood there in the quiet, touching my cheek where his thumb had been. The dirt mark was gone, but I could still feel his touch. Later that day, I walked into town, telling myself it was for essentials, but if truth be known, I was still flustered by the morning events. One moment, the sun peeked out from behind clouds. Next, the sky cracked open with a deep, rolling growl, and the heavens let loose like someone had cut a rope. Within minutes, the road turned to mud, and the sweet scent of wet pine filled the air. I huddled beneath the narrow overhang of the porch roof, arms wrapped around myself, bonnet soaked and clinging like seaweed. My boots squelched. Clementine had already abandoned me, probably hiding in the general store. Traitor. The forge door creaked open behind me. Get in here, came Calder's voice, rougher than usual. I turned. You'll track soot on my skirts. You'll catch your death. He stepped out and touched my shoulder. Come inside, out of the rain. I didn't argue. The forge was dim, glowing orange from the low fire at the back. The smell of hot iron mingled with rain and something richer, cinnamon and smoke. It was quiet, save for the crackle of flames and the occasional distant boom of thunder. He shut the door behind us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I peeled off my wet gloves, hair curling damply at my temples. I felt flushed, off balance, like the storm had followed me in. You're dripping, he said softly. You're staring. I'm allowed. I didn't respond. I couldn't. He crossed to the fire and stirred the embers with a long iron rod. Sparks flared. I moved closer, soaking in the heat. My dress clung in places it shouldn't. My stomach was pinching. My pride had been slowly dissolving in the rain since noon. I didn't come to bother you, I said. You're not bothering me. I didn't mean to stop. In a thunderstorm? I glared at him. I didn't plan the thunderstorm. Calder chuckled, low and warm. You don't plan much, do you? I bristled. I planned a marriage once. That worked out splendidly. He looked over at me, something unreadable in his eyes. I didn't mean that. I swallowed. My hands were trembling slightly. I pressed them to the warmth of the fire pit's edge. "Your hand's bleeding," he said. I looked down. A thin scrape, probably from a fence nail or that damned pail Clementine had dragged down the lane. "Sit," Calder said, pulling over a low wooden stool. "I've got a kit. I don't need—" But he was already crouched in front of me, a small tin of salve in one hand, a cloth in the other. He took my hand gently. His touch was careful, steady. Nothing like my husband's had ever been. "Bit of iodine," he murmured. "Might sting." I nodded. But when he dabbed it on, it wasn't the pain that made me flinch. It was his thumb brushing the inside of my wrist, a tiny pulse, a charge of something ancient and unstoppable. He looked up at me then, not smiling and not teasing, just seeing me. My breath caught. Neither of us moved. The air thickened, humid, humming. Calder's gaze dropped to my mouth, then back up. He leaned in. So did I. Our lips were a breath apart, and then I turned my head, just enough. He stopped. I could feel his breath on my cheek, could taste what the kiss might have been. My voice came quietly, hoarse. "It's not Founder's Day yet." He leaned back slowly, nodded once. "Right." He stood, wiped his hands on the cloth, and tossed it aside more complicated than necessary. I rose too, pulling my shawl tight. The room was too warm. My thoughts were too loud. "I should go," I said. "I'll walk you." "I can manage." He opened the door. The rain had stopped. The world outside gleamed silver, washed, clean, and new. I stepped into it, not looking back, until he said, "Lettie." I turned. His voice was low, but clear. "When Founder's Day comes, you'll kiss me." I swallowed. "Don't be so sure," I said. "I'm not." That's why I'm still trying. And somehow, that made it worse. The whole town of Belle Hollow turned out for Founder's Day. Bunting hung from every porch. There were barrels of lemonade, fiddle music on the breeze, and a pie-eating contest already in full swing beside the chapel. Children darted between boots and skirts, fingers sticky with molasses and jam. Even Clementine got involved. She stole a cornbread muffin from someone's plate and, according to Mrs. Harper, headbutted a politician. I hadn't ruled out believing her. I wore my best dress, a deep purple fitted number with tiny buttons marching up the front. I hadn't worn it since Denver. Hadn't wanted to, but today, I needed the armor. My stomach twisted. Not from fear, no, not quite. From something else, something restless that had been building since the forge, since the fire. Since Calder Dawes had looked at me like I wasn't just some sharp-tongued widow with laundry on the line and debt under the floorboards. But he hadn't come by that morning. Not a knock, not a word. I didn't like that it bothered me. Didn't like how often I scanned the crowd, pretending to look for Clementine, while my eyes tugged toward shadows and broad shoulders. And then I saw him. By accident, really. He was at the far edge of the square, sleeves rolled, hair damp from the dunk tank, laughing with a knot of townsfolk like he hadn't lit a match inside me 2 nights ago and walked away whistling. He hadn't seen me. But I saw everything. Old Dan, the same fool who'd started the wager, pulled something from his pocket. Coins. He offered them to Calder. Calder stepped back, shook his head, said something firm. Dan pressed again. Calder folded his arms, looked away, refused. Something loosened in my chest. He never wanted the money. He never wanted to win. I moved before I could think better of it. Through the crowd, past fiddlers and girls with pickled eggs, past 2 boys tugging on a ribbon. My pulse beat like a war drum. He turned just as I reached him and froze. I stood there in that purple dress, wind tugging a curl loose at my temple, cheeks flushed, heart hammering. And before he could say a word, I grabbed his shirt, pulled him down by the collar, and kissed him. Hard, hot, certain. He didn't hesitate. His hands found mine, drawing me in like he had been starving. His kiss was rough, warm, and honest, like everything else about him. And now, I let go just for that moment. I kissed him like someone who'd spent too long holding everything in, had no more use for silence. When we finally pulled apart, the crowd had gone quiet. Someone whooped. Clementine bleated. I didn't care. I looked up at Calder, still holding on to his shirt. That, I said, breathless, wasn't because you won. His mouth curved into a slow, reverent smile. No? I shook my head. That was because I did. Then he kissed me again, softer this time, one hand sliding to cradle the back of my neck. And from somewhere nearby, Dan muttered, "Well, I'll be damned." The sun dipped lower. Music resumed. The town exhaled and carried on celebrating. But at the edge of the square, where heat and pride had finally collided, I stood in my purple dress I hadn't worn in years, with a man who smelled like smoke and salvation, and I finally let myself believe that some wagers aren't lost. They're found. And so ends the tale of a wager that wasn't really about winning at all. A sharp-tongued widow, a quiet blacksmith, and a kiss neither one saw coming. Sometimes it's not about who makes the first move, but who's brave enough to stay when the game is over. If your heart's still thudding like mine, maybe there's a little Calder in all of us.